sense to purposes far more useful and entertaining, by making it assume the sock and point out the follies of ordinary life. The same method has been practiced by other Spanish and French authors, and by none more successfully than by Monsieur Lesage, who, in his Adventures of Gil Blas, has described the knavery and foibles of life with infinite humour and sagacity. The following sheets I have modelled on his plan, taking me liberty, however, to differ from him in the execution, where I thought his particular situations were uncommon, extravagant, or peculiar to the country in which the scene is laid. The disgraces of Gil Blas are, for the most part, such as rather excite mirth than compassion. He himself laughs at them, and his transitions from distress to happiness, or at least ease, are so sudden that neither the reader has time to pity him, nor himself to be acquainted with affliction. This conduct, in my opinion, not only deviates from probability, but prevents that generous indignation which ought to animate the reader against the sordid and vicious disposition of the world. I have attempted to represent modest merit struggling with every difficulty to which a friendless orphan is exposed from his own want of experience, as well as from the selfishness, envy, malice, and base indifference of mankind. To secure a favourable prepossession, I have allowed him the advantages of birth and education, which in the series of his misfortunes will, I hope, engage the ingenuous more warmly in his behalf. And though I foresee that some people will be offended at the mean scenes in which he is involved, I persuade myself that the judicious will not only perceive the necessity of describing those situations to which he must of course be confined in his low estate, but also find entertainment in viewing those parts of life where the humours and passions are undisguised by affectation, ceremony, or education, and the whimsical peculiarities of disposition appear as nature has implanted them. But I believe I need not trouble myself in vindicating a practice authorized by the best writers in this way, some of whom I have already named. Every intelligent reader will, at first sight, perceive I have not deviated from nature in the facts, which are all true in the main, although the circumstances are altered and disguised to avoid personal satire. It now remains to give my reasons for making the chief personage of this work a North Briton, which are chiefly these. I could, at a small expense, bestow on him such education as I thought the dignity of his birth and character required, which could not possibly be obtained in England by such slender means as the nature of my plan would afford. Let the next place, I could represent simplicity of manners in a remote part of the kingdom, with more propriety than in any place near the capital. And lastly, the disposition of the Scots, addicted to travelling, justifies my conduct in deriving an adventurer from that country. That the delicate reader may not be offended at the unmeaning oaths which proceed from the mouths of some persons in these memoirs, I beg leave to promise that I imagined nothing could more effectually expose the absurdity of such miserable expletives than a natural and verbal representation of the discourse in which they occur. Apologue. A young painter, indulging a vein of pleasantry, sketched a kind of conversation piece, representing a bear, an owl, a monkey, and an ass, and, to render it more striking, humorous, and moral, distinguished every figure by some emblem of human life. Bruin was exhibited in the garb and attitude of an old, toothless, drunken soldier. The owl, perched upon the handle of a coffee-pot, with spectacle on nose, seemed to contemplate a newspaper, and the ass, ornamented with a huge tie wig, which, however, could not conceal his long ears, sat for his picture to the monkey, who appeared with the implements of painting. This whimsical group afforded some mirth, and met with general approbation, until some mischievous wag hinted that the whole was a lampoon upon the friends of the performer, an insinuation which was no sooner circulated than those very people who applauded it before began to be alarmed, and even to fancy themselves signified by the several figures of the piece. Among others, a worthy personage in years, who had served in the army with reputation, being incensed at the supposed outrage, repaired to the lodging of the painter, and finding him at home, "Hark ye, Mr. Monkey," said he, "I have a good mind to convince you that though the bear has lost his teeth, he retains his paws, and that he is not so drunk but he can perceive your impertinence. Splod, sir, that toothless jaw is a damned scandalous libel. But don't you imagine me so chop-fallen as not to be able to chew the cud of resentment." Here